Max Holloway will piece up Dustin Poirier.
Hey, that'd be nice. The Diamond. Sign me up, bro. I love that guy. I got nothing but respect for the guy, but he is up 2-0 against my ass, and I don't have the best luck against people who 2-0 against me, so I guess I gotta try it again.
There's nobody else I'd rather be standing across from when I lay the gloves down or when I go into my final fight. Max is a legend. I got so much respect for the guy. He's done it all right, and that was his first fight in the UFC, and he's gonna be my last.
To be the best, you gotta beat the best, and the best is blessed. They can come after me, baby. Let's get it.
I can't wait for it. This is a sensational fight. Both of these men have had glittering careers.
I'm him, guys.
For one final dance and the end of an era.
Max vs. Dustin are set for the main event of UFC 318, and although this is going to be Dustin's retirement fight, and although Max is coming off a KO loss for the first time in his career, I'm here to tell you that Max Holloway is going to piece up Dustin Poirier. But quickly, before we get the video started, for those of you who may not know, I'm JuicyMMA, I make opinionative MMA content, and if you guys enjoy videos similar to this, hit that subscribe button, that like button, and that post notification bell. Also be sure to hit that join button for exclusive channel perks. But anyways, let's get into it. Both Max Holloway and Dustin Poirier have had amazing careers thus far. For Max, he was a former UFC champion with a bunch of title defenses under his belt, while also trying to move up to 155 to capture that belt, and although that didn't necessarily go his way, when you look at some of the guys that Max was able to beat over the years, it is a very impressive list. Of course, you talk about Justin Gaethje, the Korean Zombie, Arnold Allen, Yair Rodriguez, Calvin Kattar, Frankie Edgar even, Brian Ortega, Jose Aldo, Anthony Pettis, and the list goes on. There's just a ton of legendary guys that Max Holloway was able to beat throughout the years. And when you talk about Dustin Poirier, although he isn't a former UFC champ, he was a guy that was able to be at the top tier for a long time. He was able to compete for the belt a few different times, even winning an interim belt over Max Holloway, and some of the wins that Dustin was able to get over the years were Benoit Saint-Denis, Michael Chandler, Conor McGregor, Dan Hooker, Max Holloway of course as I mentioned, Eddie Alvarez, Gaethje, and some others as well. Both of these guys have beaten some of the best at both 145 pounds as well as 155 pounds. So matching both of these guys up at this point in their careers just makes so much sense. Both of these guys are guys that always put on tremendous performances, always go for the finish, always put on very exciting performances, and these guys are just legends of the game. They both have extremely impressive resumes, and it just seems like a perfect idea to match both of these guys up for Dustin Poirier's retirement fight and to match both of these guys up for the BMF title. But a question that some of you may be wondering at this point is, how do I think this fight is gonna go? Well, in my opinion, I do think there are paths to victory for both of these guys, and I think they're very similar paths to victory for both of them actually. I think what Dustin needs to do is pressure Max Holloway. If Dustin's able to pressure Max, push Max alongside the cage, I think that's really where he can go to work and land some of those damaging shots. Alongside the cage, Dustin can then go to work with those hooks to the body, those hooks to the head, those left straights to the head, and just go to work and utilize that great boxing that Dustin Poirier has. And even when you look back at their first fight between these guys, that's really where Dustin was having success. When he was able to pressure Max Holloway, he was able to land very effectively, he was able to hurt Max a couple of different times, and that's really a similar thing that I think he can do in this fight if he is able to pressure Max Holloway. If Dustin's game plan out there, or if at certain times within the fight, Dustin thinks it's a good idea to counter-strike with Max Holloway, I don't think that's going to go very well. Because although Max did just get knocked out by Ilia Topuria, and although Max does take a decent amount of shots out there, one thing that's a little bit overlooked about Max Holloway's game is the fact that he doesn't normally take those ginormous shots. Because when you look back at that Ilia fight, Max was able to do a great job in both rounds 1 and round 2 at staying long, utilizing his jab, utilizing his right straight, utilizing footwork, utilizing stance switches, utilizing head kicks, and for the most part part, Max was able to stay relatively safe. Yes, Ilya was landing some shots on Max Holloway, he was able to land the jab somewhat effectively, but for the most part in those first 2 rounds, Max was able to avoid most of the big shots that Ilya was going for. And I think against most fighters, that's what Max Holloway is going to be able to do. He's going to be able to avoid those ginormous shots that his opponents throw, and I think if Dustin Poirier is looking to counter-strike against Max, he's not going to have all that much success with that. And as I touched upon before, I think Max needs to do the exact same thing. I think for Max, he needs to be on that pressure. If he's able to push Dustin back alongside the cage, that's really where he can go to work and have a lot of success. Alongside the cage, Max will be able to utilize his jab, utilize his right straight, stand switch, throw a lot of volume and a lot of things out at Dustin, whether it's body kicks, whether it's leg kicks, or even head kicks. And I just think all that overall volume and the overall pressure that Max would be able to put on Dustin will be a little bit too much, and I think he's going to piece up Dustin and have a lot of success. Regardless of all the experience that Dustin has had in the UFC thus far, regardless of how much success he's been having with his counter-striking in the UFC thus far, I just think Max Holloway is a little bit different than most guys. And that pressure and that volume that he'll be able to put on Dustin will give him a lot of success in this fight and will get him the win, in my opinion. So for both guys, I think pressure is extremely important, and I think whoever is able to pressure the other guy is going to be able to win this fight. So I definitely think either guy has a path to victory in this fight. So why am I so confident that Max Holloway will piece up Dustin Poirier? Well, in my opinion, there's a couple different factors for why I feel this way. But the first reason that I want to touch upon is the shape of Max Holloway. Because when you look at Max's first fight against Dustin Poirier, Max was a completely different version of himself. At that point, he was just a fat 145 pounder. And due to that, he wasn't able to take shots as well. He wasn't able to push as hard as he normally does. And when you fast forward and look at Max's fight against Justin Gaethje, he was in perfect shape for 155 pounds. At that point, Max was able to do a great job at utilizing that volume that he normally does, but he was also able to put a lot more sting on his shots, and we saw that against a guy in Justin Gaethje who has a great chin. Of course, Max was able to completely KO him in the last seconds of that fight, but even regardless of that, Max was able to hurt Justin a bunch of times in that fight, which I think shows a different evolution of Max at 155 pounds than we saw the first time against Dustin Poirier. So I think going into this fight against Dustin, Max is going to be able to do both. He's going to be able to put a lot of volume on Dustin, but also at times he's going to be able to put a lot more sting on those shots that he does land on Dustin Poirier. Because once again, when you look back at their fight between Max and Dustin the first time, Max was able to put volume on Dustin, and there was a couple of occasions where he was able to have success, but it was apparently obvious in that fight. Whenever Max was landing on Dustin, he was just landing volume on Dustin. He wasn't necessarily hurting him. But when Dustin was landing on Max, he was hurting Max with, it seemed like, every single shot. And I think going into this fight, Max will be able to take shots a little bit better than he did at that point against Dustin, while also at the same time being able to land more venomous shots on Dustin Poirier, potentially hurting Dustin at certain points in this fight. So I definitely do think the shape that Max Holloway is in is going to be a huge factor for why I think he's going to piece up Dustin Poirier. Now, some of you may be thinking at this point, Max Holloway was just knocked out, so his chin is probably not going to be the same as it was prior. Well, in my opinion, I don't necessarily think this, because when you look at some of the guys in the more recent history that had great chins and had their chins quote unquote cracked, whether you talk about Kamaru Usman or even Justin Gaethje, both of those guys were able to go into their next fights, take some pretty big shots, and eat most of those shots. Gaethje was able to take big shots from Ziv and not really get hurt whatsoever, and Kamaru Usman was able to take big shots from Leon Edwards and also not get hurt whatsoever. So I think going into this fight, Max's chin issues or potential chin issues could be a little bit overblown, but of course we will see what does end up happening in this fight. But anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Do you think Max Holloway will piece up Dustin Poirier, or do you not think so? But anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you did enjoy, check one of these two videos popping up now, and until the next time, peace out guys.